What is this green matcha paste? This is called Koicha, and it's actually one of the two ways to prepare matcha. You may be familiar with the foamy Usucha, or thin tea, but in this video, we're going to be talking about the lesser known Koicha, or thick tea. We'll compare this tea based on flavor, texture, and health benefits to see what makes it different from the classic matcha style. This thick matcha paste is made with double the amount of powder and less than half the amount of water. It's actually drunk during special tea ceremonies, and it can only be made out of the highest quality matcha powder. When you use this quantity of matcha powder, it really intensifies the flavor, so you need to make sure that there's no bitterness at all in the matcha that you're using. For this reason, we only use premium ceremonial grade matcha for Koicha. For this experiment, we'll be using the premium Matcha Chiran, a blended matcha made from two different cultivars. Just like wine is broken down into varietals, tea is broken down into cultivars, and each one produces different flavors. Most matcha is made from the Yabukita cultivar, but this tends to have more bitter flavors, especially when it's produced as a Koicha. The Okomidori cultivar has a much smoother taste profile with less bitterness, so it works great as a Koicha. The premium Matcha Chiran is a blend of Okomidori and Asatsuyu, another rare cultivar that is known for its natural sweetness. I wanted to prepare this tea as an Usucha matcha and as a Koicha matcha to see how the taste differs. For the Usucha, I'll use 2 grams of powder and 80 milliliters of water. I'll be using a scale wherever possible to keep the measurements accurate. By the way, 1 milliliter of water weighs exactly 1 gram, so you can use a scale to measure out both your tea and your water. Pretty cool trick. For the Koicha matcha, I actually scaled up the measurements because I wanted to make sure I had enough. I used 8 grams of the same matcha and poured in 60 milliliters of water. Normally, the ratio would be 4 grams of matcha powder and 30 milliliters of water, but most of it ends up sticking to the bowl, so I wanted to make sure that I had enough to pour into a glass. For Koicha matcha, you don't need to whisk the matcha because you're not trying to get foam. You can just gently stir the matcha until it's combined evenly into the water. There's actually a special type of whisk for making Koicha matcha, with 36 thick bristles, but here I'll just be using a regular chasen. What you want to do here is make sure that there are no clumps in your Koicha matcha. All of the powder should be combined into the water. Just take your time and make sure the paste is smooth. You can always add a little bit more water in later if it's too thick. You want the consistency to be thin enough to pour and drink, but not thin like water. Now that I have the right consistency, I think it's time to do a little comparison of the health benefits of these two matcha teas. The important thing to know about matcha is that because the powder is mixed directly into water, you're consuming the entire leaf, along with all of its health benefits. This means that the nutrient profile is easy to measure. 4 times the powder is 4 times the antioxidants, caffeine, amino acids, and vitamins. Even though there is more liquid in the Usucha matcha, the Koicha actually has 4 times the nutrients. The standard Usucha matcha already has 6 to 10 times the antioxidants as a cup of normal green tea, but the Koicha is on a whole nother level. This is like a super concentrated matcha shot, with each sip bringing the nutrients of 10 cups of normal green tea. But before you go pounding Koicha shots, we need to talk about the caffeine. So a premium matcha like this will have 34 milligrams of caffeine per gram of powder. A regular bowl of Usucha matcha will have 68 milligrams of caffeine, which is relatively low compared to the 90 milligrams in a small cup of coffee. 8 grams of matcha, on the other hand, will have 272 milligrams of caffeine. So the two of these together will be a combined 340 milligrams of caffeine. This is really more caffeine than you should be drinking in a day, but I had a lot of videos to edit, so I figured I'd give it a try. I poured the two teas out into a glass for a side-by-side comparison. The Usucha was easy to pour, but the Koicha matcha really took its time. You can get an idea of just how thick this paste is by watching it pour out. By the way, before you get worried about the caffeine content, just note that a lot of the paste never left the bowl. Good thing I made extra. So even though these are the same matcha teas, they couldn't be more different. The Usucha is light, airy, and creamy, and the Koicha matcha is intense and vegetal. You'd have to really like matcha to enjoy the flavor of this. It really coats your palate, and because it's so thick, the aftertaste is really long. Because the Chiran is such a high quality matcha, the taste of the Koicha is still smooth, but it's really intense. The taste takes over right away and begins to dominate with these steamed vegetable, slightly grassy, and floral tasting notes. This is not how I want to drink matcha every day, but it could be nice for special occasions. One positive note about Usucha matcha is that it actually has a foam, which gives it an airier consistency and taste, almost like a latte, but without milk and sugar. Speaking of lattes, one big advantage Koicha has is that it can actually work very well in lattes. Have you ever had a matcha latte that just tasted watered down? It's probably because there is too much water in it. One way you can cut back on the water in your matcha latte is to just make the Koicha paste and then add the milk directly into it. I added some milk to the the Usucha matcha and the Koicha matcha to see how the two compared as a latte. The Usucha matcha tasted quite watery, but the Koicha matcha latte was probably one of the best lattes I've ever had. The taste was so rich, I felt like I was really drinking a matcha latte instead of just a glass of green milk. Whether you're making Koicha matcha or Usucha matcha, the Chiran Premium works great in both, and if you want to try it out for yourself, you can find it on our website. After traveling around Japan for the past few years, we've met with dozens of farmers and sampled hundreds of different pesticide-free matcha teas. We've ultimately selected a handful of our favorites, and you can find them all at neoteas.com. Another way to support this channel is by liking this video and subscribing for more matcha tips. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next time.